We are now in an everyone a changemaker world. That means that everybody has to have the skills to be a changemaker. And the only way you do that is by doing it, practicing it. Middle and high school is critical, and it has to continue in college and on into the workplace.
The world has become so multidisciplinary that you cannot be successful alone. You got to bring the talents of many together.
We are in a world where the way we've organized and the way education has been done for millennia no longer works. It used to be you train people in a skill, a body of knowledge, a set of rules, and then they repeat that over their life, be it as a baker or a banker. And you were organized in stovepipes to do that. Now, it's not A fits B, but everyone is bumping everyone else. You change and it bumps everyone around them. And so it's a kaleidoscope of everyone bumping and causing everything else to change. So you have an environment where you need, on your team, 1,000 eyes, understand what's going on, put that together, develop a new team of teams so that you can really do a good job of serving a new need. And that's a continuous and accelerating process. So this model, this educational model, doesn't work. And what you've just seen is a school that's committed to creating change makers. And that's what we need at every level of life, starting in elementary school, middle, high school, certainly universities, and then in the workplace. And it's still very exceptional. So we're very grateful to be with you here because we're building together a team of teams of a small group of middle and high schools, universities, and workplaces that understand we are now in an everyone a changemaker world. That means that everybody has to have the skills to be a changemaker. And the only way you do that is by doing it, practicing it. Middle and high school is critical, and it has to continue in college and on into the workplace.
What did it mean to you, Sheldon, when you found out about this partnership, that you'd be the first in Canada with Ashoka?
When we were using the word entrepreneur, if I could be candid, everyone was associating it immediately with business and you got to make money, or that there was an economic return. And I have nothing against economic returns. But we also knew that there was a lot more than economic returns happening. There were social returns happening. And whether or not it was the Bionic Group or any of the four you saw, we saw that that whole understanding of what an entrepreneur was, almost a definition, was non-social. So when we became Ashoka, if I could put it that way, it began to open up a whole lot of people's understanding that an entrepreneur was a social entrepreneur, a business, and they all had value. And so Ashoka gave almost like a legitimization. It gave a language under which we could now talk. Mm-hmm. And an association, we could say, well, Brown is an Ashoka University. So it gave us an ability to communicate to our community that it was not only a for-profit issue, it was also a social issue. So Ashoka became a critically important language, if I could call it, an association to help broaden the understanding of what we were trying to do here. And it has really, really helped.
So that's how you would, I mean, I'm just thinking about the difference in terms of the definition of terms here. A social entrepreneur or social innovator and a regular entrepreneur, regular innovator, is the social has wider, broader social implications or value?
So, yeah. One of the questions that I've been asked is, what's the difference between them? And so I would say this. When I look at a young person that is on the social side, the business side, I don't see much difference. Yeah. They all have a great passion. They all see something that they can make the world better at. And some of them interpret it that on top of it, it will make a business better. But its motivation, as our chancellor would say, is to change the status quo in a positive way. And some do it in terms of a commercial sense of it, of creating a new way of doing banking or whatever. And the other person sees it as we saw with a shoe, to be able to help other people. But in their belly, the fire that they could make a positive change to the world to make it better is the same. And so from a young person's point of view of what I have seen is that they're all motivated by their passion to make a difference. And on the social side, I never saw it. That's funny, you know. I always saw that people were motivated to make things better. And then we saw people that were going to make it better, what you could call on the social side. Some people make it better on the commercial side. So by and large, it's the same. I would say the following, and I got to make this comment, and congratulate Bill and Ashoka, and that is, the world has become so multidisciplinary that what we saw today is a great example of you cannot be successful alone. You got to bring the talents of many together. And the social innovator, to be able to see the computer science, the engineer, the designer, the humanist, and all of that as part of a team to make a difference is hugely powerful. And universities have always been structured in a disciplinary way. And yet these young people that we have seen have said, well, that's very interesting, but I'm not going to go down that road. I'm going to do it this way. And as they do it, they bump into the social entrepreneur, the commercial entrepreneur, the social scientist, the business person, and all of those. So really what's happening in all of this is that the people that you saw, they are the ones that are changing education. It's not the universities. They are demanding the change by going horizontal rather than thinking these are vertical disciplines.
Bill, would you agree with that?
I think it's just been describing the Everyone a Changemaker organization. Everyone is a co-creator. Everyone is a change maker. And the organization has to become what you've been describing, a fluid, take down the walls, internal and external, open. If there's an idea anywhere in the world, you want to grab it. Can't leave it out. And a team of teams. And a team, by definition, means everyone is a player. Everyone takes initiative. Think of a basketball team. I was terrible at basketball, but it's still a good analog. The team leader isn't in the position. You've got the ball. You've got to decide what to do with it instantly. Well, the same thing is true in a world where everything is changing faster and faster and is more and more interconnected. You have to have a team where everyone on the team is co-creating, co-leading, co-initiating. And the new leadership is envisage, enable, ensure. So you've got to help your team of teams, in this changing environment, here is a place that we can make a really big difference. The team says, yes, we believe in that. This is going to produce value. And then you've got to build a new team of teams, almost by definition. And you've got to make it work. Well, that's a very complicated set of things that people have to do. And you can't afford to have anyone on your team who doesn't have those skills. And so the Changemaker campuses, they're very few. So far, only about 30 of the 169 who've applied. Because it's hard to break out of the stovepipes. For example, the authorities that grade universities are stovepiped, and they don't know how to deal with a university that cuts across. There are many barriers when you move from a world that is completely coherent, organized around efficiency and repetition, to a world organized around the value is in contributing to change, and everyone has to be a change maker. So one of Ryerson's special qualities is it's very deeply embedded in the community. Well, the community includes the alumni, the neighbors. It also includes the schools that send students here. And it's absolutely critical that middle and high schools become everyone a change maker places as well. Let me just quickly tell you a story. We had a gathering of middle and high school and early college Ashoka Youth Ventures. So I sit down at lunch. This very tiny young woman comes over to sit next to me. She's very small. She immediately says, "I'm 12. She's sick of people thinking she's 8. And, okay, so what's your venture? Well, my brother is autistic, and every time I saw him being mistreated, I would cry. And now we fixed that. Oh, well, how did you do that? Well, we get together whenever we see a special student. The stories this morning reminded me of this story. And we figure out how to intervene, and we do, and we're very persistent. Now, if you'd been listening to her, you would know that she's going to be a change maker for life. She has her PhD in the most important thing that she has to have to be able to contribute in this world. She comes from a poor community. So I asked her, how many students are there in your middle school? Oh, over 50. Very, very rare. She went into an everyone a change maker community. She had a problem. Everyone said, well, you had a problem. You find a solution. You build a team. You change this place. And she did. Now, that's what Ryerson's doing. Ryerson has an opportunity to reach back into the middle and high schools. It has a connection to the community. This is a matter of changing the framework of thinking. The moment parents or teachers or principals or policy people understand that the new game is everybody a change maker, then of course they want their daughter to have this experience. They want the kids in their community to have it, but it takes us building together a team of teams, starting with the first universities, the first middle schools, the first high schools, who get it, who believe it. They are the co-creators and co-leaders.
Where do you see Ashoka going? Where would you like it to go ultimately? What goal is set?
Well, I think we all have a realization that moving to an everyone a change maker world is A, necessary, and B, it's a much better place. When everyone's a change maker, there is no way that the problems can outrun the solutions. And it's inherently a deeply more equal place because everyone is powerful, everyone can give. And that last point, everyone in this room, certainly the 4 people we just heard, they have the ultimate gift in life. We have it. We are able to express love and respect in action, and all the prophets and all the scientists tell us that that's what brings happiness, longevity, all the good things in life. And now, instead of a few people having that and everyone else increasingly being afraid of a world they don't understand, everyone gets to do that. So this is a much better world, and the alternative is very grim. If we continue having a few percent maybe having these skills and so many others dropping off the edge of the world where they can't play, we're going to have a very deeply divided, unsuccessful, angry society. And so I think we all, once we see it, we have the goal that we want to make sure that Canada and the US and India and Poland become everyone a change maker places quickly with as little pain in the transition as possible. And we're not going to allow another generation of children to come up without the fundamental skills, empathy-based ethics, teamwork, a very different type of leadership and change-making. And so that's our ambition, and we're working, we're very privileged with the 3,000 Ashoka Fellows, now with the community of Changemaker campuses, a growing community of Changemakers schools. We're starting to work with Changemaker companies. These are the pioneers, and together we have got to help the world, everybody, see, okay, this is the new game. It's a really good game, and here's how you can play it.
Thank you, Bill. We have time for a couple of questions from the audience, if anybody'd like to ask a question to Bill or to Sheldon. Seeing no hands. Going once.
There's one back there. Rick.
Oh, good. Okay, go ahead.
This question is for both Bill and Sheldon. What do you think is the single most important competency that 21st century changemakers are going to need?
Well, I think it's very simple. It's empathy-based ethics. It's a very careful phrase. We all have the empathetic skill of our mirror neurons, but so do elephants. What we're talking about here is cognitive empathy, and the definition of that is you observe yourself, understanding all the people around you, layers out, further and further into the future as the future comes at you faster and faster. And now in a kaleidoscope of constantly changing contexts, and you have to understand the groups, the contexts as well. And you have to do that to be able to guide yourself to be a good contributive person, someone who does not do harm. As the rate of change goes up, the rules by definition cover less and less. And you're more and more in conflict as you're thrown together with all sorts of groups. It is absolutely essential to have this skill. And it is not something that you just were born with. You have to learn it. So you also don't get to teamwork or the new leadership of everyone being co-leaders with you or change-making without this foundational skill. It has to be learned. So all 4 skills have to be learned. And I have just, in effect, articulated the next step, the next paradigm, which is an additional paradigm. We still need knowledge for education, which is, again, why Ryerson is so important. It's a pioneer in making sure that everyone has this. You heard the empathy-based ethics in these 4 examples. Now, just imagine what it's like for the millions and millions and millions of children who are not being given this skill. They are going to be marginalized because they'll hurt people and they'll disrupt groups. And if you hurt me, I don't care how much astrophysics you have. I want you out of my life and it's your fault. And that's what's happening right now. And it's so easy. Mary Gordon, Ashoka Fellow, close colleague, right in this city, started as a teacher here. She can get any group of kids to master this empathy in a couple of hours a month for a year. So I think it's completely fundamental. We can do it, we know how to do it, but we have to change the framework of thinking so that everyone knows that it's essential.
I'm glad you answered first. I'll give another perspective, and I will go back to the convocations we had, and we had a convocation speaker talk about this, and that is the sense that individuals think they own their lives. And by that I mean that you believe you have the power to make a difference, the power of one to be able to add on to your one, others to make a difference, in this sense that you don't have to just follow. And I don't know, and I think that's part of the education and a huge responsibility of education. so that individuals do believe that they have power to make a difference. And you don't have to just wear the same clothes that other people do. You can define your own suit and your own path for a positive difference. And that was the elements of a convocation speech. And I think universities, high schools, everyone have that responsibility to help everyone understand that they could be part of this game. This is for everyone, not for a select few.
Thank you, Sheldon. Yes, saw a question down here.
Bill, I know Mary, and in fact, Mary Gordon, and she asked me to moderate a panel on empathy and democracy. So I just want to put a little grain of sand in the empathy works. I mean, I completely believe in it, but I think that there's a danger that we see empathy only in terms of empathy for the vulnerable and the innocent, rather than empathy for everyone. And one of the problems that we have, the gridlock in US politics, is we lack empathy for those with whom we disagree. When there are equal forms of power, one of the dangers of this kind of work is that we tend to sentimentalize those whom we think are vulnerable, rather than recognizing, as with the Maasai and Terriano, their inherent strengths and their powers, not to feel pity, but genuine empathy, which is to recognize equalities. I think that can be nurtured in a place like Ryerson, but it's very important not to nurture simply feelings of sentiment for those who we think are either innocent or vulnerable.
Yes.
I'm Allison Kemper. I teach in the entrepreneurship department at Ted Rogers School of Management here, and I'm a longtime social activist, and I'm also very interested in sustainability and the lack of sustainability in our world. And I've harassed Rick George with this before. I mean, Rick about this before, but it seems to me that we're in big trouble pervasively, and that change is happening in our world not just in an accelerating way, but in an exponential and occasionally discontinuous way. And that our models of social innovation have to do with entrepreneurs who are almost by definition individuals, and with incremental change that may accelerate, but is not necessarily going to be able to change the world as fast as we need to. So I'd love to hear your comments on networked innovation, networked change, and discontinuous change, because we're facing discontinuous change for the worse right now. How do we create massive social innovation projects? I'd like to say movements, but using the kind of models that you've been developing for decades.
That's exactly what collaborative entrepreneurship does. And you're entirely right, it's new. Let me use the example, since we've been talking about empathy-based ethics. So there are 700 Ashoka Fellows out of the 3,000 who are focused primarily on children and young people, and of course many more who deal with it. And when you look across those 700 examples, and remember over half have changed national policy and 3/4 the pattern in their field, the national level within 5 years. So this is a very powerful group. We actually know how to help children master and practice empathy-based ethics very successfully. But then we have the challenge, and each of those pieces is not sufficient. So Mary has children grasp it, then other fellows show how you practice it in many different ways, for example. But then, that clearly isn't doing it. We have to change how the whole society sees its future. Oh, we are now playing a new game. Now we're in the everyone a changemaker world. And then make a decision, which is a framework change, a mindset change. Every child must practice empathy-based ethics, and every teenager better practice being a change maker. All 4 skills. That one sentence is a profound change, and it's analogous to the decision society made 150 to 50 years ago, depending on the country, that everybody, again, the same first word, must master written language. Anyone who does not master written language now is profoundly, profoundly disadvantaged. That was very radical when that happened. The Latin-speaking elite that controlled access to God and knowledge really disliked it. They burned people at the stake for doing the Bible in English in England. Well, we now have the next big framework change. And so how do we work together to actually make that happen? Well, so this is one of the reasons that we're here with Ryerson, where Ashoka is working with others. We had a very lovely dinner last night with several people who were here. How do we help Canada go through this tipping process? So I don't know the exact numbers for Canada, so let me just use the numbers for the US, where we now have 2 years' experience. Out of the 80,000 elementary schools, we think we need 60, which, just like the university, here there's a team of people who totally get everyone a change maker, and therefore empathy-based ethics is critical. And therefore, they are thrilled. They're on a big playing field. They have a really big opportunity to play. They've got to figure out how to make it work. We're not giving them a curriculum. We're not playing Henry Ford. They have access to the 700. They have access to whatever we can find in the universities and one another. But they make it happen. This is building the team of teams, again, just like the university here. So 60 schools with a team that gets everyone a change makers and owns it. 30 writers and publishers, again, who understand, this is an opportunity for you, who understand this is the new game. This is the big news story, and here's what it means for the readers, users. Now, either without the other doesn't have what they need. You put them together, plus the team of fellows. So Mary here is playing an important role in the US over the last 2 years to make this happen. That's 91 teams. We can do that. Now, that is a trigger. The trigger then, and this is what every entrepreneur does, you find what's the least number of forces you have to set in motion to actually change the system, to create a self-multiplying dynamic that pulls in other forces. So that's 91 teams, 60 schools, 30 writers and publishers, a team of fellows. We already have 10 graduate schools of education who are saying, we see this as the next big thing, and boy, do we want to be ahead at that curve. You know, the dean's career is made if he's got one of the only graduate schools that can solve the demand of suddenly 10,000 and then 30,000 schools. All right, so this is a process of us working together on the highest level of leverage, which is mindset change. Entrepreneuring together. So it's exactly what you're describing. It can't be done with everyone in isolated pieces. But there's an architecture to this new world. And it's very sophisticated. There's nothing unsophisticated about a global team of teams. I'm just describing the team of teams of leading social entrepreneurs and the leading allies for any major change.
Now, get on a bit of a soapbox because your question gives that as an opportunity. So you talked about exponential and yet discontinuous. I think one of the real challenges that we have is that we find ourselves that failure is a sin, risk is impossible to take, and the moment that you get in there, then getting on a curve other than a very, very slow slope under which you take every step and you make sure that everyone loves you on every step, you never get anywhere. And when you get on that very slow slope, you will always make sure you get the next step by asking the experts, because the experts will tell you whether you've made the right step. And the experts probably have a lot of self-interest in that step. And the experts probably are looking in the rear-view mirror of where they came from, and they want the next step to go to where they want it to go to. And so whether it's governments or whether it's universities or whatever the institution, they have a horrible time about believing in the future and taking the risk necessary that will always, failure is a possibility. So to get any speed at all, you've got to have some guts, to, like an entrepreneur, to accept that you might not get to the right place. But I am certain that continuing to take these low, small steps by looking in the rearview mirror is the biggest problem we have. And governments suffer it, but we have to look at ourselves, because that's universities too, whether they're boards of governors or whether they're senates. And I'm not speaking of Ryerson, I'm just speaking generally. We have no understanding of how to accept failure. And unless you know how to accept failure, you could never, ever dream about getting on any accelerated path, let alone a discontinuous path, because they're dangerous. And you don't know all the answers to it. And if you look at an entrepreneur lives the life of failure, almost by definition. But our society has to begin to accept that perfection isn't the game, because perfection gets you nowhere. What this is having a bit of confidence in a better future and taking some risk.
Thank you, Sheldon. Sheldon, Bill, before I let you go, I'm going to invite Susan Piggott to say a few words.
Great, thanks, Seamus. Thank you very much. It's been my great privilege over the past year to serve as the executive in residence at Ashoka Canada. Our executive director, Alicia Muscat's on maternity leave. I've got two colleagues with me from Ashoka, Durka Kumathausaran and Claudia Di Simone. Ashoka Canada is relatively new in the Ashoka world. We've been around as an entity for just over 10 years. We've elected 53 fellows. We're learning from those fellows. We're following the pattern in the country offices that have a longer history. We're reaching out to partnerships with educational institutions like Ryerson. We're starting to work with other partners in the community. Many of you are here. I'm looking at you, Marilyn Struthers from Ryerson, who are embedded in the Faculty of Community Services. We're starting to work with the Ontario Trillium Foundation and, of course, with Mars to do our bit to contribute to an everyone a change-maker world. As we look to the next decade for Ashoka Canada, we are emboldened by what's been happening in other countries to believe that with our partnerships here, we can make a big difference. We will continue to seek out leading social entrepreneurs to add to our Ashoka Fellowship, because we believe that Canadians have a tremendous amount to offer the global network, and we're underrepresented. Canada is becoming a remarkably innovative country, particularly in terms of social entrepreneurs. But we also realize that we do need to do more to start to work with other institutions around the Everyone a Changemaker. And soon, if you haven't, some of you who are sort of insiders will already have heard that the McConnell Foundation, who's been such an important leader, is about to initiate a program to try and encourage other post-secondary institutions to come on board in terms of social innovation right across the whole curriculum. There's no question, Sheldon, that they've been inspired to do this by what you've done here at Ryerson. So I just want to conclude by saying how grateful I am that so many people came out today to hear Sheldon and Bill. We are so proud, Bill, to have you as our founder here in Toronto, and we're keeping you very busy. We're going to be, as Allison knows, over at Mars later this afternoon. If any of you would like to join us, Ilse Turnick is going to be interviewing Bill there. But we also want to show off what's going on here, which we're very proud of. So I want to thank you all for coming. I particularly want to thank our presenters. I was blown away. I've already heard presenters here at Ryerson before. I come away as a sort of old-fashioned, ingrained social worker, really just so inspired by what I would say the next and the next generation are doing. It's really, really inspirational. So thank you all for coming. And Sheldon, I'd be remiss if I didn't do a special thanks to you, not only for this morning, but you have been a tremendous supporter of Ashoka. And we are very proud that you've agreed to be a strategic advisor to us as we try to develop Ashoka in Canada. Thanks. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, everybody, for coming. Much appreciated.